All right, thanks for that, Christian. I've got to agree. I would definitely run into that wall at least once or twice.
I'm sure I would.
Yeah.
Absolutely sure I would.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're going to welcome in our next guest, and we've got Jay Grimes joining us, Director of Federal Affairs for OOIDA, to talk a little bit about what's going on with the FMCSA's new ruling on emergency relief. Jay, thank you for being here. We talked with John Gallagher, our Washington correspondent, about this earlier on in the week, and it's kind of an interesting case, right? Really kind of rolling back on what drivers can do during emergency situations. What does this mean for those who use emergencies as an opportunity to really step in and help?
Yeah, a couple things here, and a little bit of kind of an unforeseen rulemaking from the agency, considering that we always hear them say that there's no evidence of decreased safety during emergency periods and when these emergency exemptions are granted. And I think earlier this year they put out a proposal that would do a couple different things. It would narrow the scope of the emergency relief that is granted from all the federal motor carrier safety regulations, parts 390 through 399, to really just focus on hours of service, which generally is the regulation that drivers are going to need the emergency relief from to deliver these supplies in a timely fashion. But kind of one thing we had a really major concern with was reducing this 30-day window down to an automatic 5-day window, which we thought was way too short considering some of the nature of these exemptions, which can last weeks on end. We also thought that there would be a lot of confusion in such a short window for the agency to grant and extend the exemption periods there, given such a short window. The final rule came back, maintained the narrow scope of relief, just to hours of service, and did a little better moving back that proposed 5-day window to 14 days. But kind of given the fact that we don't see any, more dangerous situations or increased number of crashes or accidents in these emergency exemptions, we really still question the need to kind of reduce the scope of relief and to narrow down that 30-day period to 14 days when really every minute counts in these emergency situations.
Certainly, you can see that with a major hurricane or a major natural disaster that'll take a number of weeks, if not months, to try and get some recovery up. Where do you think the number should be?
Yeah, we thought it should have stayed at 30, kind of given the fact that things seem to run pretty smoothly. So we'll see if the 14 days is sufficient. This is going to publish officially tomorrow, and then will take effect 60 days after that. So going to be in that winter season, and I'm sure there's going to be scenarios where we see regional declarations get announced, and hopefully the supplies can get there when they're needed. We've also got another aspect to this where if FMCSA decides to grant an extension of that 14-day window, it's likely that motor carriers are going to have to submit information and reporting paperwork to acknowledge that they're operating under the extension. We saw a little bit of this during the last portion of the COVID national emergency exemptions that covered a whole host of regulations in different scenarios. And kind of within this, FMCSA said that the data that they gathered through there was not enough to really make informed decisions. So going to maybe try that again in some certain scenarios that merit an extension of the initial 14-day window.
So, Jay, if I could go into the mind of the FMCSA while making this decision, I would assume that they were thinking about, okay, what about these opportunistic drivers who don't have anything to necessarily do with the emergency order, but they're just taking advantage of the fact that for 30 days, if you're in the area, you can drive without worrying about hours of service or things like that. Is there any data supporting that thought that drivers are taking advantage of this, or is it just simply a non-issue that was maybe assumed in the rulemaking that doesn't actually happen?
Yeah, no, there's no data that FMCSA presents to indicate that, and kind of throughout the final rulemaking, they even acknowledge that. They say FMCSA has no detailed quantitative information that suggests past or existing emergency exemptions have negatively impacted road safety. It has no information suggesting that exemptions from all safety regulations in parts 390 through 399, have any negative impact. And throughout the final rule, there's references to the lack of data presented. And they do make a couple points saying, it's common sense, that if drivers are on the road longer, that could create more fatigue. But there's not really any hard data that they allude to here in this final rule. And I think that really echoes kind of what we've been saying, all along when this was first proposed. Is this a solution in search of a problem, given the lack of data that FMCSA has? So, it's one that we're probably going to have to now wait and see what happens when it goes into effect in December, and really fingers crossed that we don't see any trucks or drivers unable to get into some of these areas where really urgent disaster relief is needed.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is basically is in effect only for those regional emergencies, not so much the presidential or federal ones, which trigger automatically the 30 days that someone can come in and provide relief effort here as well. Given that, if that's correct, looking at these from regional standpoints, how serious is this in terms of, obviously, 14 days? Hopefully, I think they're looking at that as saying, well, the emergency must not be that bad if the federal government isn't weighing in.
Yeah, and you're correct on that. This does not apply to presidential or federal emergency declarations, but if memory serves me correct, I think that the COVID national declaration was really the only time that we've seen a national emergency declaration. So it is these regional, these state emergencies that happen, all frequently, whether it's, the typical ones you see are in response to weather emergencies. So those happen, quite frequently. And certainly there are instances where they last longer than 2 weeks. Especially it seems like within recent years, we've had more and more severe storms there. And you want to give these states and governors all the resources they need to address response, cleanup, rescue, and so forth. So, hopeful that 14 days is going to, be able to provide that. But, there's definitely going to be situations where you're going to need more time. Hopefully, and historically, FMCSA has acted efficiently to extend these regional exemptions when necessary. But now that it's down to 14 days, you do wonder if that's going to create a little bit of confusion, at least in the first few instances.
And hopefully FMCSA starts tracking some data to have some tangible proof on if this actually works or not. Jay, thank you for joining us this morning. It's great to hear from you guys as always, and we'll talk to y'all soon.
Thank you.